Every Friday at 2 o'clock, we have Dr. Bridge Bomby. Now, Dr. Bomby, of course, is one of the physician owners of the Bakersfield Heart Hospital, as well as Centric Health. He's been coming on this show for a while now, answering your questions. I had asked Dr. Bomby if you could share a little bit about his background. We're going to wait on that for a second and get an update on where we are with the viruses. So much is going on right now. Plus, we have a couple questions from listeners, too. Dr. Bridge Bomby, welcome back, sir. How are you?
Richard, I'm very well. How are you?
I could not be better. You sound great up there. Very, very good. Hey, how significant is this introduction of the approval supposed to come today for the Johnson & Johnson virus? Can you talk about that for a second?
I think it's very significant because in my experience, there is a segment of people, a population, who have some fundamental concerns about the messenger RNA vaccine, which is the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccine. So a lot of people, I wouldn't say a large percentage, but a significant minority of people have been waiting for Johnson & Johnson vaccine. And as we have previously discussed, it really answers all the hard endpoints that a vaccine needs to answer, which is prevent hospitalization, prevent death, and minimize severity of disease. So it checks all those boxes. It's a great tool that adds to our repertoire.
Would you explain to me in layman's terms, I know you have before, the difference scientifically in this vaccine and the Pfizer and Moderna vaccine, why some people were waiting on this because the way it's made and would prefer this over the others?
There is a concern in the pro-life people who are committed to the pro-life notion that a fetus tissue was taken to extract genetic material that somehow is foundational to the messenger RNA vaccine. Even though that it's a 50th or 60th generation of a dead fetus tissue, and there is no actual aborted material that has been incorporated or considered in the development of the vaccine. But the stigma stays. Even Pope has come out and blessed both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. So there isn't I would say, a religious valid ground, but it's about faith. So some people have that faith-driven objection to the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. The Johnson & Johnson is more of a standard vaccine in which they have, instead of the RNA, they have a DNA molecule that isn't brought from the lineage of previous tissues. It's a DNA that they insert in an adenovirus, and that adenovirus doesn't know how to replicate. It's basically a letter carrier. It takes the DNA, deposits in a person's cell, and the DNA comes out, and in the nucleus of the cell, it starts generating the messenger RNA that creates the spike proteins, and the body reacts to spike proteins and thinks it's an infection and creates an immune system. So it's a similar concept, but a little different, and has nothing to do with even, I would say, exaggerated concerns of people who seriously believe in that.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Now, do you happen to know that I read anecdotally about how the problem with getting two vaccines is some people get lost in the process. Either they opt out or they never end up taking the second dose. And of course, Johnson & Johnson is a one-dose vaccine. Have you seen, Dr. Bomby, any statistics on how many people, either locally or nationally, have had the first dose and then do not return for their second one?
I don't think, Richard, we are in that conundrum yet, because remember the separation between the Pfizer 2 shots is 3 weeks recommended separation, and the recommended separation for the Moderna is 4 weeks. But the realistic scientific separation could be 12 weeks. So I don't think we have really breached the outer limits of the anticipated booster dose. We'll find out. I don't think that data exists right now. But generally speaking, the people who take the first shot are the ones who actually made an effort to get the first shot.
Yeah.
So there's I feel a fair degree of optimism that the attrition or the failure rate for the second shot wouldn't be that high.
Yeah, I read a story the other day about Moderna, and I don't know if Pfizer is doing this, is already looking at tweaking its vaccine so it will address some of the threats of the variants. Is that possible in a vaccine makeup like Johnson & Johnson? Could they do the same thing?
So the recustomization of the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines is a little easier because they really go back to the computer and they construct a strand and they're able to. It's really a computer game for them. To a large extent, it is similarly so for Johnson & Johnson. So Pfizer has said they are able to find a new vaccine for a new strain within 6 weeks. And they're suggesting a third shot, as you mentioned, for improving the immune response even further so that even a diluted immune response, because of the volume of the response, will be able to counter a variant. And Moderna already has started testing a vaccine in response to the South African variant. And this concept of recustomizing or retooling the vaccine to the new variants is open and accessible to all the vaccine makers. So we have a very robust platform from where we can be responsive as the virus continues to move the goalpost. We're able to adapt our defensive strategy to that. But the most important thing still remains prevention. There is no room for being lackadaisical, not at this stage of the game.
Yeah, not now. We've come so far. Dr. Brahmani, do you anticipate for those of us who have had the vaccine and or are waiting for their second shot or whatever, or about to get here in the next couple months as we get more product online, do you anticipate that by the end of the year we will all be taking some form of a booster shot?
That's hard to answer. And even if it is, that's a small price to pay. That's hard to answer because we haven't been there. So remember, we don't have a track record. Those projections are retrospective, not prospective. We can only say in retrospective manner that, yes, it's effective for a long period of time. But the evidence suggests there is a reason to be optimistic that the SARS-1 virus lent antibody immunity for 2 to 3 years, but the T-cell immunity for 18 years. So there is a reason to hope, but we don't want to, as you say, hope is not a strategy. We still have to be cognizant of our individual responsibilities and don't give the virus a chance to mutate and come in some other malicious incarnation.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's go to a questions. We've had some questions text in. JR, you want to take it?
Yeah, Green Nut Rich chimed in and said his mother is 78, is allergic to penicillin and also allergic to sulfa, and has had valley fever twice. She got the Moderna vaccine. She got the first shot, and she had a delayed allergic reaction, which consisted of a localized rash, injection site swelling, itching, and mild shaking. Her primary physician gave her an allergy shot, which didn't really help, and recommended that she delay getting the second shot. She also recommended that there be an EMT available at the location if she decided to get the second shot. Should she consider switching to the Pfizer vaccine or possibly waiting for the Johnson & Johnson vaccine?
Oh, that's a complicated question. I hate to answer a question when another physician is involved, and I may present a counterpoint. But the reaction she seemed to have was a local and not anaphylactic. It wasn't severe enough to negate the acceptance of the second dose. If I was in that person's shoe, I would not hesitate to get the second dose. And as far as the presence of EMT, that's a prerequisite. Anytime we administer vaccine. We have nurses, we have the emergency toolkit, and we watch. So that's a part of the infrastructure, is to have a support mechanism in case bad things happen. We respond quickly.
Wow. Okay. There you go. It's always tricky with these people with pre-existing conditions. You got another one there, JR?
Yeah, one more. Somebody got their second Moderna vaccine on Monday. They're wondering if it would be safe or wise to get the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in a few months.
I don't think we need to overachieve. Let the facts dictate. Over-vaccination for the sake of vaccination isn't a recommended strategy, should not be a recommended strategy. I think it's amazing to see the spectrum of people, the ones who are not satisfied with the degree of immunity they achieve, and the others who are anti-vaxxers. It's kind of a good, it's a chasm that's difficult to resolve, but taking a third shot for the sake of the third shot, or having another, it's not like parking two cars in the garage. I don't think that makes sense unless something happens with the variants and science dictates that makes that's an acceptable recommendation.
That's interesting. Anything else there, JR?
Yeah. One more. Somebody says, what about if I had the virus? Is the vaccine safe?
Absolutely. So the science on that is getting fairly well settled. If a person has had the infection, the recommended wait period after the infection is 90 days to 6 months. I would push to 6 months, and then the booster dose does an incredible hike or amplification in the antibodies. That's 140 times more than the regular two-shot vaccine. So a single shot, 3 to 6 months after the infection, is recommended and is phenomenally successful.
Okay, are you saying a single shot after you've had the two?
Yeah, after the infection.
Oh,
if
after
a
the
person
infection.
had an infection.
Yeah, okay.
So there is no reason to have two shots. A single shot confers immunity that's way above and beyond the two-shot dose in a person who wasn't previously infected.
Okay, that would be you, JR. Yeah,
I'm in that.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking to Dr. Bridge Bombay, 842-5376. You can text in any questions here. And Dr. Bombay, I wanted to ask you about kind of your personal life, but we're going to save that for maybe next week because I wanted more time with it because we still have some questions on the vaccine themselves. Dr. Bombay, do we know how long these vaccines are going to be good for? And is it like, do they gradually wear off? Do vaccines gradually wear off out of time, over time? Or are they like car batteries, just die overnight now? I mean, do they generally lose effectiveness? And will there be a time when all 340 million Americans are going to have to go back and do this again?
That's a very good question, Richard. So talking about the immunity following either infection or the vaccine, there are two components to it. One is neutralizing immunity, other is protective immunity. Protective immunity means that the disease is, you get a shield against the disease. Neutralizing immunity means that you cannot get infection and thus cannot be a vector or can spread it to others. An ideal vaccine should have both neutralizing and protective immunity. And we know that in 5% of the cases who have Moderna or the Pfizer, they may become asymptomatic carriers of the vaccine, of the virus. The second component is the efficacy and the durability of the vaccine. The durability, as we discussed, only time will tell because that's a retrospective statement. The immunity, does it fade off or does it precipitously decline after a certain period of time?
Right.
It's also a question that's a good question waiting for an answer because time will tell. But again, I bring back it's reasonably well-grounded optimism based on its previous cousin, the SARS-1 virus that lent fairly sustainable immunity as opposed to influenza virus that we struggle with. So there's a reason to believe that we have gotten over the hump as a country and maybe as the world. But remember, the vulnerability anywhere exposes the risk of virus mutation, that if it mutates in a certain way, that it can evade the existing immunity through the vaccine or previous infections. We are exposed once again to repeat infections. So that's why we need to make sure that the whole world is immunized, not the 340 million people in this country, but the world as a whole. And that's where the COVAX and other programs are coming into play. And it's very heartening to see, Richard, that people are recognizing that it isn't a threat that's confined to a given segment of society or a country. That thought process may be ethically challenged as it is, but it also lacks common sense, because virus anywhere is virus everywhere. And fortunately, we are on track to get ahead of the virus if we continue to pay attention to our individual responsibilities.
I mean, so basically what you're saying, Dr. Bombi, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that we could effectively reach herd immunity in pockets of this country or in the country as a whole, but if parts of South America or Africa go without and the vaccine is morphing into something or evolving into something else, that becomes a strain that is introduced into this country, then we would have a whole new problem. And is that the issue with getting the entire world vaccinated?
Very eloquently put, Richard, exactly. So give you an example, a place called East Cape in South Africa. That town was exposed to the virus, and because there was still an outbreak going, the immunity that was created by the infection demanded the virus escapes that immunity, because when the fire is burning from this outbreak and some segment of the population is immunized, the virus or the pathogen is under what we call selective pressure. It's evolutionary pressure. So the virus tries to escape the existing immunity. So if we are allowing the virus to continue to spread in some part of the world and other part of the world has selective immunity to that, the virus will mutate around the immunity. And that's how the South African strain was born. It's an interesting race between the immunity and the infection. So you have to overwhelm the immunity side by vaccinating people so the virus doesn't have a chance to take another go at us.
Okay. And finally, in the time we have left, you mentioned it earlier. I think there's a tendency here, Doc, for all of us to let our guard down. I mean, you start looking around and all your friends and your family and everybody's getting their first and second shots. Things are looking good. Society's starting to open up. Again, you turn on TV and people are like advertising to go on beach vacations and everywhere. But what you said earlier is this is not a time to let our guard down. So tell me what we should be doing. Should we still be wearing masks?
Absolutely. The threat has mitigated, but it retains the right to come around in a more malicious form. So we have to be cognizant of the fact, and we have to do all the right things. Basically, same things, but in a more relaxed manner. You can have family of 10 or 12 have a dinner together and be a little far apart in seating arrangement. And when too close, wear the mask. We're in 7th inning, and we're winning.
Oh, man,
there's no reason.
Okay, that's
to
good.
Squander it away.
All right. Well, let's don't let up now. Let's make this happen because things are starting to happen here. Dr. Bridge Bombay, always great to have you on, sir. I hope you have a terrific weekend, my friend.
Thank you, Richard. You too. You
Okay,
too.
buddy. We'll talk.
News Talk 96.1 and AM 1180 KERN.
It is 2:06. I'm here with Chris Burdick. Chris Burdick, of course, is filling in for J.R. Flores, who's taking a few days off. Thank you, Mr. Burdick. Always great to have you here.
Thank you, sir.
And as we do it here, we always keep it fast, informative, honest, and civil. Let's go to our next guest. Every 2 o'clock on Fridays, I have Dr. Bridge Bombi here of Centric Health and Central Cardiology. Dr. Bombi, right now, the topic A for us, of course, has been the coronavirus. And Dr. Bombi comes on every week to lend some expertise for you, the listener. Dr. Bridge Bombi, welcome back to the show, friend.
Thank you, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing a terrific. Dr. Bombi, it's amazing how time seems to move things along, but just in the last week, it seems like we've had some good news. Maybe looks like Johnson & Johnson has a vaccine that's queuing up, maybe for approval as soon as next week. Dr. Bombi, I was saying earlier on the show that just in the last couple of days, I'm starting to talk to a lot of people who are getting their second shot. Some of these, of course, are healthcare workers who a month ago who were inoculated. Maybe I'm wrong. It just seems to me that we're, making some progress here. A lot more people are getting their first shots and people are getting their second shots. And we got the Johnson & Johnson thing out there. And, of course, we do have the Super Bowl weekend. Can you tell us a little bit about this Johnson & Johnson vaccine and how it's different and how that might help us here?
Richard, your assessment is spot on. I think between the number of infections we have incurred, both in the Kern County and across the nation, we have 100,000 or so infections in Kern County. And if you use a simple multiple of 2, there are likely at least 200,000, if not more, people who were infected. So they become part of the solution now because they create an immunity barrier against the virus to jump. And you throw in another, I don't know the numbers of vaccinated in Kern so far, but probably about 50, 60,000. Okay. So that creates, out of the 600,000 that need to be vaccinated, you're talking 35% or so people, I would say the same math applies to the nation, who have immunity to the COVID virus. So what that does is it lessens the chances of it bouncing from one person to another and decreases the chances of explosion of cases. But even though we have this enlarging repertoire of the vaccines, we need to be cautious. Every time we have had a holiday weekend, I don't care if it was Memorial Day or July 4th, Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Christmas, we have had resurgence of infections. And it'll be, as you said, it'll be foolish to tempt the fate one more time and have another resurgence. Even though we're making the turn in Kern County number of cases, our ICU capacity is still stretched. We're still denying elective care. I wouldn't call it elective, non-emergent care, cardiac patients to other people who need it. So we need to be cognizant of persistent high positivity rate in Kern County and do our civic duty by not getting infected and spreading the infection.
Yeah. When you talk about, I know we're well short of herd immunity, but we follow up on your thread. You're talking about as more and more people get either the vaccine or build up antibodies from having had it. Did you say 35%? Is that accurate?
35% of the people who would qualify for the vaccine.
Okay.
Because if you take out age 16 and under out, that's about 18-20% of the population. So if you do the math, for us in Kern County, there are about 650,000 people who would need vaccination. Either they got the infection or the vaccine. So if you have 100,000 documented infection, for every documented infection, there is going to be 1 or 2 persons who had asymptomatic infection, so they don't know it, but they're part of creating the herd immunity. And the same math actually extends to the country as a whole.
So if we, I mean, are you warning against falling into kind of a false sense of security as more and more people get vaccinated? People feel maybe like they can come out of their shell a little bit or not wear the mask or do something. I mean, are we in danger as we get closer and closer to the goal of becoming lapse and then allowing the vaccine to get a new hold?
Exactly right. With all those variants coming from different parts of the world, and the one here right here in California called the Californian variant, we can't let loose our guard because those variants have different perspectives. There is higher contagiousness, there is higher virulence, there is a vaccine escape, there is a chance the people who were previously infected will get reinfected. And every time we allow virus to infect somebody and replicate, we allow virus to chance to mutate again. So it's our collective responsibility to minimize the possibility of infection. You minimize it by getting vaccinated and by not getting exposed.
Oh, interesting. We're talking to Dr. Bridge Bombi of Centric Cardiology and Centric Health. Doctor, when you mentioned the California variant. Can you tell me what that is, and can you speak to different emerging variants as a whole?
The California variant, I don't know much about yet, but it has the same alleged propensity towards increased contagiousness. So the British variant, which was the first one in the news, had higher contagiousness. So, Richard, let's say if you have the same dose of the virus, and the virus is more adept at gaining traction into the cells in the body, just by the same dose, it's going to infect more cells, and the contagiousness is going to lead to adverse consequences because it's getting a better hold of the host. The second component is the virulence. If it's more spreadable and also more dangerous or more potent, that's a 1-2 punch. The same 1-2 punch has been observed in South African variant and in the Brazilian variant. The Brazilian variant, however, comes with the added danger that the people who were previously infected can get reinfected. With one caveat that we don't know if the data coming from Brazil is totally credible, that the seropositivity they demonstrated that would confirm the previous infection is actually reliable or not. But be as it may, the triple threat we face with variants is increased contagiousness, increased virulence, and the fact that the previous immunity may be overrun by new variant.
God, that's terrifying. Dr. Bombi, you're describing these vaccines. I want you to help me here. Do all viruses, this is going to sound, I know viruses mutate, but do they all mutate and change in a way in response to vaccines? Because I'm trying to pick up on what you're saying. So one vaccine does X, so the virus will mutate in a way that will keep or maybe even improve its virulence or its ability to spread. In other words, when you're dealing with viruses, is it always a moving target that you're always having to look at new vaccines or booster vaccines? How does that work?
The COVID-19 is an RNA virus. The RNA viruses, like the Hep C, the influenza virus, the HIV virus, they have less fidelity in replication. That means that they're internally flawed by lack of a comprehensive proofreading system, that they don't self-replicate as they should. The genome of COVID-19 is more sturdier than influenza, so it's less likely to have mutations. But the flaw in messenger RNA or in the RNA viruses is the lack of comprehensive proofreading. that predisposes them to have errors in replication, and those errors, just from a statistical standpoint, sometimes are evolutionary positive for the virus, sometimes they're evolutionary negative. Negative meaning that they may make the virus less contagious. Positive meaning they make the virus more contagious. The whole notion here is not to give virus the possibility to continue to replicate and explore those options. Yes, when you have a vaccine, the virus has an evolutionary pressure to escape. That's why we develop the antibiotic resistance, because the bugs know how to work around an antibiotic. So the bugs will find a way to work around the vaccine. So it will be vaccine escape. That's what we're seeing in South Africa in both the J&J vaccine and in the Novavax vaccine and AstraZeneca vaccine, that the efficiency drops from 75% to about 50%. Even though the efficiency in infection prevention drops, the silver lining is the efficiency in hospitalization and death prevention is almost 100%. Even when they're attenuated in the response to contain the virus, they're still achieving the hard endpoint, which is lower the severity of the disease, prevent hospitalization, and prevent death.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, how that's different? Now, this one you don't need 2 shots with. It's just 1 shot, correct?
That's correct. So Johnson & Johnson is based on our pre-existing technology in which they use attenuated adenovirus, which is like a letter carrier. It's a postman. It delivers the letter. All it does is it has a key to the post office box. So it delivers the virus inside the spike protein inside the cell, and then the virus dies. So it doesn't replicate itself. It's just a delivery tool. And the messenger RNA based viruses, on the other hand, are RNA itself, so that makes them very fragile. So this, basically you have a stowaway spike protein interlaced in an attenuated adenovirus that knocks at the door of the cell. The virus is the spike protein is delivered, and it starts the immune response. What it brings to the table is it's a lack of necessity that biology demands for preservation at extremely low temperatures. So it makes the logistics very simple. So this is like a regular flu vaccine. Instead of storing at minus 94, you just have the regular fridge, not even the freezer. So the transportability, the fact that all the doctor's offices can handle it, even the one with the least acute, makes it very user-friendly option. And we also know when we compare the 95% efficacy of Moderna and Pfizer vaccine with J&J that has 77% efficacy, it's apples to oranges, because J&J vaccine was tried at a time when the mutants were out there. So it was organically reducing the efficacy because of the mutants. There is a fair amount of belief in the scientific community that if Moderna and Pfizer vaccines were tried under the same circumstances, they would have lost some of their proclaimed efficacy also. So J&J is an excellent vaccine, easily storable, 1 shot, prevents death, prevents hospitalization. It's an important advance in protecting the society.
So you would have no hesitation to take the J&J vaccine as opposed to the Moderna or Pfizer?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay. What about, there's been a lot of talk about we may be eventually, and you and I have talked about this before too, about are we, once we hopefully get to herd immunity and most Americans have received both shots or 1 shot with the J&J, are we headed to a point where we just assume that every year we're going to get some kind of booster shot to bolster our immunity?
That would be not an undesirable goal. What's getting our attention now is because the mutations are occurring that are potentially ominous, both from the contagiousness and the virulence standpoint. We have to make sure we deny the virus the opportunity to replicate. Just because we in USA or in the West can vaccinate a lot of our people doesn't mean that the virus goes away. We have to make sure the whole world, it isn't a U.S. problem, it isn't a Canada problem, it's a world problem. If it exists in South Africa or sub-Saharan countries, it will mutate there. And the new mutant will come out as a new virus or a new variant that will override our previous immunity. So it's necessary not to be short-sighted in our vision and to think only of us and allow the virus to continue to replicate, mutate, and have a whack-a-mole strategy with getting infected all over again.
God, that's terrifying. So if there's any region of the world that is not vaccinated, as you said, you could have a mutated virus, or we're going to start from square one all over again. Well, that brings us to, we were talking about the final question here, the logistics of the vaccination, and you had said last week that why are we setting up these mega centers like the Kern County Fairgrounds or Dodger Stadium? Why didn't we just let the medical professionals do it? Which I had wondered in the beginning, why aren't I going to my primary physician's office for this? Why am I looking somewhere else? Has there been any talk since then about, in an effort to boost the distribution, to go back to what you had suggested, just let you guys do what you know how to do?
Richard, I'm a country doc. Nobody listens to me. I don't have an audience in Sacramento or in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So I appreciate the compliment, but I'm not worthy. But to answer your question, Centric Health has multiple, I think 3 or 4 sites now that have been approved, but they're sitting on no vaccine. Heart Hospital has done a phenomenal job. I think it's a lead center in the community, if not the lead center in vaccinating people. So the bottleneck is the availability of vaccine. So I have no idea. It defeats at least my mind. Why would you create temporary centers, waste a lot of resources when a robust infrastructure exists that can easily vaccinate people? And it's so much easier on the patients because the underlying trust, there isn't any exchange of new information. We're not opening them to a new center where they're sharing the telephone number, the date of birth, their other data. And, the breach of data can happen at every level. But why are we giving more opportunities? So the fact that it's truly to me, it's a travesty of common sense. There is no rationale going that route. Even today, they approved 1,000 military personnel to set up mass vaccination centers, and it just defies my sense of comprehension.
That's amazing. All right, Dr. Bridge Bomby, everybody, we are out of town. Dr. Bomby, thank you so much. Stay safe this weekend. I don't want to hear reports that you and your family at a big Super Bowl party with 100 other people.
It's going to be a large Zoom party, so there will be...
Zoom party. Good. Very good. Dr. Bridge Bomby, everybody, thank you, sir. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, bud. Bye-bye.
Okay, buddy. All right, there you go. Let's take a quick break and be back here at 2:25. Remember, we got Movie Mike coming up after the bottom of the hour break. We'll be right back here on KERN.